Hey, good morning on the East Coast. I just want to do a little update about chemical weapons and the use of chemical weapons since that hit yesterday, and still like verifying the use of chemical weapons is going to take some time, may never happen, right? It may be conjecture, it may be coincidence, it may be the actual employment of a chemical agent in Mariupol. We don't know right now. Probably, yeah. But do we know? Not really. All right, so try to flip this around, I need to start working better, tying everything back to the principles of war, right? Because if you look at the principles of war, this is the underlying understanding that military and strategic civilian leaders should have to understand how to execute and prosecute a war. Um, if you don't adhere to the principles of war, you're probably going to have a bad time because you're going to miss something, or you're not going to have a complete plan. You're not you're going to stretch your forces too thin. You're going to concentrate them too much. You're going to decentralize command and control to such a point that there is no control. Um, or you'll oversimplify or overcomplicate it, right? So this is the stuff that I personally would think about, especially at the battalion and above levels. Um, to think of how are we actually putting this together in the most succinct and actionable manner for the men and women who have to conduct the combat operation, right? How do you make this so that they can execute and conduct their mission to do their job? Because there's always, no matter how good of a strategist or a commander or a staff weenie you are, the plan always has to be executed, right? By the men and women holding the rifle. Try gotta think of who your user is of your brilliance, right? Because your brilliance probably sucks. All right. So principles of war, right? So there's the United States, our friends in Britain, Australia, the former Soviet Union. This is probably still the Russian principles of war. France keeps it really simple, and then our friends over in China who sell us rubber dog poop and things we don't really need, but we buy them all the time anyway, right? So they line up pretty. Ours, and the Brits and the Chinese line up pretty well. So talk chemical weapons, and I'm trying to move my stupid idiot face around and make me smaller or whatever. Um, so first off, don't think the United States is innocent, right? Like never assume that we've always been good and benevolent. No, we've been the baddies, right? And we have used chemical weapons, and it was part of our doctrine for a long time, right? Since World War One through World War Two, and then the Korean War. Chemical warfare was part of our tactical doctrine. But then we realized how evil chemical warfare is, and we needed to move away from that. But just because we move away from it doesn't mean the rest of the world does. Throughout my military career, and anyone who served in the military, you've always trained for a chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, electronic type attack, right? And we kind of mash those together. But we've always planned for that because we always assume that the big bad guys will use chemical weapons. We've always assumed that Russia would use chemical weapons. China, North Korea, Iran, Iraq, Syria, right? These actors are the ones we assume that chemical weapons are part of their conventional military capabilities. All right. And just throw my disclaimer out. This is at an unclassified, open source level, and it is not for necessarily for the military professional. All right, I'm not at the chemical school at Fort Leonard Wood teaching on the podium here. This is information regarding chemical weapons at a fairly basic level, right? So to show you that chemical weapons were part of our doctrine, right? The tables and some of this information here I pulled out of FM 3-5, the Chemical Warfare Service Field Manual, Tactics of Chemical Warfare from July of 1942. Okay, so that's during World War II. Generally, there are two basic types of chemical weapons. There's also smoke, right? We use smoke as a screening agent, right, to obscure the enemy from observing us, right? So that's another kind of chemical weapon, but it's not used as a weapon, right? Normally that's a phosphorus, or white phosphorus, or red phosphorus. That creates a smoke cloud that prevents the enemy from being able to see us, right? So Americans don't fire that on enemy positions. We fire it between us and the enemy position to screen our movement and maneuver, right? But when we talk about weapons, what you think of as a weapon, there are two basic types: persistent and non-persistent. Persistent chemical agent, it's going to stay there, right? It's not going anywhere, in any short period of time, right? And then non-persistent chemicals. Non-persistent chemicals, something like sarin is dissipated and it's gone in 24 hours, right? So that's non-persistent, all right? So depending on what the agent is, and I'm not going to go into all the different agent types. I'm not going to talk about sarins and VXs and nerves and, go into specifics, right? I'm going to keep it rather general, but a non-persistent agent, some of them will last up to like a week, depending on the weather conditions. Some of them, like sarin, they're gone within 24 hours. Because they just degrade so rapidly that they cease to exist, right? So persistent and non-persistent, right? That's the duration of the effect on the battlefield, right? And the key to remember with chemical weapons, right? Chemical weapons don't have feelings, right? They don't care who they attack. They don't care if they're attacking friendlies or enemies. There is no such thing to the agent itself, all right? So that's why you really have to think about persistent and non-persistent, right, and what type, and try to identify. And there's plenty of systems and sensors and all kinds of doodads that detect chemical agents and will tell you exactly what it is, or at least get you really close in categorization. All right. So also, I already mentioned some other types, right? We have casualty agents. These are designed to kill, right? Harassing agents, they achieve more of an effect. Screening agents, right? Obscuration, they prevent people from seeing, and as well as sensors and systems from seeing. Okay, because there are actually screening agents that have graphite or some other chemical added to it that will even start to prevent sensors and thermal imaging devices from seeing through the smoke. All right. And then incendiary agents, all right? Incendiary, that's burning, like thermite. Phosphorus, right? Phosphorus, white, red phosphorus screens, it also burns. All right. So we get into the casualty harassing agents, right? You got your lung irritants. All right. You have your vesicants. Those are blistering agents that you usually attack, like the eyes and the mucous membranes and the skin itself, and will make it blister. All right. Normally with a vesicant, the effect of the chemical is delayed after exposure, right? So you'll have it on you And it'll take a while before it festers up, and then all of a sudden your skin's feels like it's on fire, right? Systemic poisons, right? Systemic, they attack systems inside the body, right, and shut them down, right? So those are fatal. And other irritant agents, mucous membrane, short duration. They're annoying. They're not usually not fatal, all right? So if you look over in the top right, this is a chart, figure 2, taken right out of that FM 3-5, right? And we have way more chemical agents that exist in the world today than we had in 1942, right? And this is really just talking about the U.S. inventory, right? Right. And we got a tactical classification, a persistency classification, and a physiological classification, right? Where there's a lung irritant, a vesicant, an irritant, a systemic poison. What is it? Casually harassing, obscuring, incendiary, right? And, so you can see like mustard. You remember old mustard gas, right? There it is. In our inventory, part of our tactical doctrine from 1942. All right, we would use mustard as a casualty or harassing agent. It is highly persistent, all right, and it is a lung irritant and a vesicant. All right, primarily a vesicant and an additional lung irritant capability. All right, so you can go through here as a planner and literally choose your poison. All right. Getting to some other things. Why use chemical weapons? And some of those classifications already mentioned should lead you into, especially if you've served in the military, into, why would I want to use this? Because it's bad stuff. But ultimately, I'm going to say but chemical weapons are used to achieve a tactical effect, right? It's used to shape the battlefield. All right. I don't want someone to go somewhere, or I want to move them somewhere else, so I can use my direct fire, my indirect fire, my air platforms more effectively, right? So I'm shaping and moving the enemy on the battlefield with chemical weapons. Right, just as I would with artillery or a bomb, right? It's just another tool in the kit bag that some of our adversaries utilize to shape the battlefield. It can also be used to degrade enemy capability and capacity, right? If I have to fight wearing a gas mask, that's degrading my capability. All right? If you deny the best position for me to shoot my artillery from, you're degrading my indirect fire capability and capacity, right? So it can be used in that manner. Degrades morale. I don't care what army it is. You do not want to fight after you've been slimed. Right, even if you get, it comes in, you get your mask on, all your protective equipment, you can fight, and you're pretty well protected against chemical agents if you're in MOP 4, mission oriented protective posture level 4, right, with your suit and your boots and your gloves and your mask, but it sucks. It's hot. It's hard to breathe. And you know that outside of all this, you're slimed with something that, if there's a hole in your equipment, you break the seal on your mask, this stuff's going to kill you, right? So it does attack the psyche, attacks the morale, in addition to degrading capability. Chemical weapons bypass obstacles, right? Because vapors or liquids or whatever the delivery method is can get into buildings, can get into trenches, can go places where your bullet can't, right? So a gas can go around a wall, can go through gaps in doors and windows into a building, right? Bullets go straight. Gases go wherever a gas can go. So if I need to remove people from buildings, I need to remove them from trenches, right? Because ultimately, clearing buildings and clearing trenches are difficult, high-risk military operations. But if I can fire a chemical weapon in that general area and allow it to permeate the building, allow it to permeate the trench, I'm going to displace the enemy from that, or I'm going to kill them in it. And then I don't have to put my people in those. Right? Because trenches and buildings require a lot of people, and they're very high risk, dangerous places to go as an attacking force, right? So it's a great use of a chemical weapon, right? Because it reduces exposure to my own force. We can reinforce other weapons' effects. Kind of hit on this, right? If I fire a chemical weapon in conjunction with conventional munitions, right? I'm moving. I shape the battlefield with the chemical, move them to an open area, and reinforce the effects of machine guns and mortars and cannon, rocket artillery, other direct fire weapon systems, right? It reinforces everything else that I have. Already hit this with permeates the atmosphere. Strongly held enemy defensive positions, right? Like trenches and buildings. The chemical weapon goes in, through, around, and has an effect on enemy positions. You can also use chemical weapons. Don't use it on their combat forces. Don't use it on their trigger pullers. Use it on their support assets. Contaminate their food. Contaminate their water. Contaminate the routes that their support units have to take to move logistics forward. If the enemy has a designated reserve and you identify it, slime them. Now that reserve needs to go through a decontamination before they can be committed to the fight, right? So you're reducing enemy capability and capacity. Reduces excessive casualties on your side. We hit that. Like I don't want to take trenches. I don't want to take buildings. If I can do it another way, right? And chemical weapons allow some of our adversaries an option that can reduce their own casualties, right? Because it can force the evacuation of an area, right? And lastly, we can prevent the use of an area, right? Isolate it, neutralize, right? If we identify an area, they're like, this is where I would want to shoot all of my rocket artillery from. Well, don't let the enemy have that area we'll put some kind of non-persistent, maybe a persistent agent in that area. And as soon as they start getting towards it, all their chemical alarms are going to go, whoop, 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 right? And tell them, like, don't go any further, there's chemical agents here, right? And now they can't set up and, their prepared position for artillery and shoot from there because it's slimed, right? It's contaminated. So chemical weapons can be used for that as well, right? So multiple uses, and so when you're facing an adversary who has chemical weapons capability, think about what their intent is. Is their intent just to kill, or is it tied to making you do something the enemy wants you to do? Which is probably more the case, right? They want you to abandon that building, abandon that strong point, abandon that trench. They don't want you to go into this area because it gives you a marked advantage. So many reasons why chemical weapons can be used by an adversary. All right. Now, as you're considering chemical weapons, think about the effects of terrain and weather, because terrain and weather affect everything, and they really have an effect on chemical weapons. All right. So wind speed, wind direction, dominant winds, prevailing winds, right? Temperature. All right? And not just hot or cold, but when we get below freezing, or we get into Arctic temperatures, we have convection, right, where we have different temperatures colliding with one another, like especially like on a coast. Clouds, cloud coverage. What type of clouds? What's the ceiling? How low are the clouds? How thick are the clouds? We have fog. Oh, fog is clouds. Humidity. Fog is humidity. Dependent what kind of humidity we have. What's the temperature as well, and the winds, and how all these play together. We have precipitation. Right? It's really humid out, but is it raining? No, it's not raining. It rained last night, and now it's 3 a.m, and it's really humid. All right, precipitation. What type? Is it rain? Is it sleet, snow, hail? What is it? All right, what atmospheric pressure? Barometric pressure, right? 29.92 is barometric pressure at sea level, right? Do we have a high pressure zone coming in that's pushing down on the earth? Is the sky pressing down on the earth, or do we have a low pressure and it's releasing that? All right. How's the chemical weapon effect diluted? Right. Vertical rise, lateral spread. Is it drug across the ground? Is it a persistent chemical that's being drug across the ground, that's settling, absorbing into the earth, so that a month from now, if we walk across this and we stir back up this agent, and sometimes agents are destroyed, right? Humidity, precipitation, hydrolysis can destroy agents, right? And then ultimately, this is the most favorable conditions for utilization of chemical weapons. So the least favorable would be the complete opposite, right? Heavily overcast, right? Clouds, heavy cloud cover. Why? It forms an insulating layer that keeps it down. It doesn't allow it to dissipate up, okay? Night, early morning, right? We have more of a consistent temperature. All right. We don't have a convection that would cause it to rise. Level terrain. It doesn't have areas that it can flow into and hide down to into a depression or a valley. All right. When the ground is colder than the air, all right, lets it just hang there. It doesn't dissipate. It just it stays there. Very low wind. Low wind. Right? 0 to 4 miles per hour if it's fired from a projectile. 3 to 8 miles per hour if positionally fired, like a unmanned aerial system dissipates, drops an agent, right? It'll get a little bit of a spread with a very low or no wind, and really get that effect, right? Because it's all about chemical weapons. It's about achieving those effects. All right. Last thing I want to show here is, when I think about chemical weapons, I think about terrain analysis more than anything. All right, so there are multiple tools, and some of them I don't have. I'm a civilian now, right? I'm retired. I don't have access to digital terrain elevation data. Like the active component American military and our NATO allies, right? We have access to sub-meter DTED data that will really help me analyze the terrain, and my terrain analysis is really going to feed my understanding of how the enemy is going to use chemical weapons, right? So this is Ukraine. This is just a topographic map showing some really good elevation information, right? But this is the whole country, right? I really need to, if I want to look at Mariupol, I want to zoom in down here on the coast and really understand, where specifically chemical weapons will have the maximum effect, right? So there are tools that you have to use, and you're building a layered understanding of terrain and weather. Right? You can't divorce the terrain and the weather when you're talking about chemical weapons. They really go together, right? Because the elevation data with the barometric pressure, precipitation, temperature, clouds, wind, it all builds knowledge, right, and understanding, right? So you got to use that together, right? Here's some other examples of mapping tools. Here in the bottom right, this is what you want. This is the D10 kind of data you want, where it's going to show me, like, am I going to use a chemical agent here? No, absolutely, it's useless. It's not going to really achieve effect in that kind of terrain. It'll achieve effect here. All right. This is where it will achieve effect. And I really can't tell if that's a road or a river, but we say if that's a road, right? And well, that's how I can move supplies. That's how I can move armored vehicles. Right? So where along this route would I fire a non-persistent chemical agent that would prevent my adversary from being able to move along that line of communication there? Right? So we're going to say this is road, and I think it is, because it would be kind of weird for a river to go up. Whereas these do look like lakes here in this valley. Right? But where along here can I utilize a chemical agent, right? And I'm not going to use it here because the elevation is going down, right? So it's not going to have the effect, even a non-persistent effect there, because gravity is going to take it down into that valley, right? But if I look back here, this is probably a really good area, right, to utilize a non-persistent or even a persistent agent, right, that prevents or significantly reduces the enemy's capability and capacity to conduct their mission. Right? That's probably way back in here. Right? They're going to hit that. They're going to get slimed if they have the chemical agent detection systems. They're going to have to step back and evaluate how they're doing and what they're doing, and maybe look at an alternate route, which may be, as the unit that fired the chemical munition, I want you to take that alternate route. I want you to go up through here and come out on this side because I've got a combined arms army sitting there waiting, right? So how do I shape the terrain to achieve effect, right? So we got to really look at terrain and understand the effects of weather on the terrain and how that affects a chemical munition, right? So ultimately, I'm not, with the probable utilization of a chemical agent in Ukraine yesterday, I just wanted to put something together, keep it a little short, try to keep it layman's terms on understanding of why chemical weapons are used, why they're used, and how militaries think about chemical weapons. Not going into significant specific details of what it was, right? We believe it based on reporting. It looks like sarin, right, which is a non-persistent nerve agent. It could also be white phosphorus, right, which should be used as a screening agent, but if it is fired onto a building or into a trench, all right, it's incendiary as well, and can have some of those other effects, right? Effects on the skin. It will, obviously it's burning at thousands of degrees, so it'll cause blistering. If the smoke is inhaled, it can obviously be an irritant as well, right? So, unknown right now. If it happened, if it did happen, what it was. Was it an actual chemical agent with the intent to have a chemical weapon effect? Or was it a screening agent that was used in a more malicious manner? No idea right now. Okay, but it's something that the international community is going to pay more attention to in the coming days and weeks. Just based on the initial reporting and what's being fed across Telegraph and Twitter and TikTok or whatever else is being used out there to get the story out off of the battlefield. So hope this was useful. Hope it gives you a little bit of an understanding of chemical weapons. Again, not a chemical officer, not a member of the U.S. Chemical Corps, but it's something I lived with and had to have a decent understanding of throughout my 23 years of military service, because as an armor officer, as a tank and cavalryman, you have to plan and account for the adversary's use of chemical weapons. If you don't, you're failing yourself, you're failing your men, you're failing your mission. So just a little bit of my 30 plus minutes of 2-cent stuff coming out of my mouth. Hope it's useful. Hope it contributes to your understanding of developing the situation in Ukraine. So tomorrow, it's Tuesday. So Thursday I'll be back on Borderlands project. This will probably be one of the topics we talk about there, as well as Russia starting to establish and prepare to increase the level of offensive operations in the Donbass. So I expect that to be part of the conversation on Thursday. So, hey, have a good Tuesday, and see everyone soon.